Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallim ala Sayyid al-Awwaleen wal-Akhirin. Nabiyyana Muhammadan wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ba'd. All praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, I begin with the greeting words of the righteous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we reached another milestone in our understanding of minarets and thrones. And that is the critical understanding of leadership in Islam, the relationship of the powerful, the rulers, the umara, with the ulama. So those who are in power, what is their relationship with scholars? And how does that bring about an Islamic society to give the strength and the power to overcome the wickedness and evil that is in the world? Because the shaitan, wa'iyadu billah, has promised to attack human beings from all sides. And one of the big attacks naturally comes through leadership, through governance, through power in this world. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the last prophet, peace be upon him, with not only superiority, divine guidance spiritually, but also to be able to escape the torments of Mecca and to migrate to Medina and then establish an Islamic society there, to be the governor, to be the leader of the Muslims, the Prophet, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this set a pace for Muslims that was followed throughout the century. That Islam is not just a spiritual belief, but it is a belief, it is a way of life that affects everything that we do. So that's not just how we pray, but it's also how we do business, how we govern our society, how we live with our families, our relationship to neighbors, our relationship one state to another. And so, with this understanding, the issue of governance, the issue of leadership is critical. And in those times in history, when the leaders of Islam were able to practice the deen, when they had the fusion between power and knowledge, Islam flourished. But when the opposite happened, and there was a division between the leaders became tawaghit, they became tyrants, and the scholars got quiet, then oppression stalked the land. And this is a dangerous area. And the Prophet ﷺ even spoke about what could happen to the emirs. When the leaders are out of control, when they're not underneath divine revelation, they're capable of almost anything. And the Prophet ﷺ even said in one authentic hadith, يَكُونُ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَرَاء هُمْ شَرٌّ مِنَ الْمَجُوسِ. He said, there will be ruling over you amirs, and they will be worse than the fire worshippers, than the majus. So worse than people who don't even believe in Allah, who have no mercy. And this would come to pass. So therefore, it is critical for us to understand what happened in Islamic history. It's also critical for us to understand how this applies to today. So how this applies to the world that we are living in today. And this is where we want to take a look at what happened with the scholars, and then also apply this to the world that we are living in today, giving us a reflection on not only what we hope will happen in the present, but what we project to happen, inshallah, in the future. And so we recognize that the highest level of leadership is the prophetic level, and that is really the holistic approach to governance and rule. And that is where the leader is not only powerful and effective, but also pious, also implementing the lifestyle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best examples of this happened in the first generations. And the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُم. The best people are in my generation, then the generation that follows it, and then the generation follows that one. And so we get beautiful examples of how leadership should be carried out in this first time. And so we're calling it like a type of fusion, a coming together of power and piety. And the fourth example of this is the great Khalifa Amir al-Mu'mineen ibn Abi Talib, and he is one of the prime examples of somebody who had natural, innate leadership qualities, who also had a type of Islamic education, and then, through the will of Allah, was able to put this into practice. So Ali was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ and turned out to be his son-in-law. So Ali's father, Abu Talib, is the uncle of the Prophet. And when the Prophet's father had passed away, his mother passed away, he came into the guidance of Abu Talib. So Abu Talib became like his father in a sense. And when the Prophet ﷺ married Khadija, she was not only a pious woman, she was a wealthy person. So even though the Prophet, peace be upon him, was from Hashemi clan, they were not that wealthy. And Mecca was going through difficult times. And so Khadija was one of the wealthy people in the city. And so when the Prophet married her, he then came into wealth. And our books tell us, our understanding tell us that Abu Talib was so poor, he was struggling physically, that he said to Muhammad, "Can you take my son Ali? Take him into your house, like raise him. You don't become his father because he's your cousin, but raise him in your house because we literally can't afford this at this point in time." And so Ali was then raised in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and by the will of Allah, none of the Prophet's sons succeeded him. They died in their youth, in their childhood. And so Ali, in a sense, was like his son. So therefore, he not only had what we would call today Islamic education, but he had tarbiyah. And tarbiyah is more than just education as we know it. Because education today is more book learning, it's information. But tarbiyah is a type of upbringing. So it is not just words. You learn lifestyle, you learn so much wisdom when you go through tarbiyah. And so Ali then had this type of tarbiyah. He knew the Prophet ﷺ. He was under his guidance before he was a prophet, and then even after he had become a prophet. So Ali then was a special person, and he had a special understanding of Islam. There is no doubt about it. And we look to him as one of the great companions, known for his wisdom and his character. Again, he had this tarbiyah. So as a young man, you love your parent. You will be very similar to them. You'll pick up even their body characteristics, their traits. So Ali was like this with the Prophet ﷺ. And so much so that the Prophet, peace be upon him, married him to his daughter Fatima. So Fatima radiallahu anha, who was so beloved by the Prophet ﷺ, more than anybody. And one time when he was talking about Usama ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhu, remember Usama, whose mother was Ayman, Ethiopian, an African woman, and the father an Arab woman, and they were in slavery, and they came out and became great companions. So Usama was their son, right? And the Prophet ﷺ loved Usama very much. And on one occasion, he said, "Ana uhibbu Usama illa Fatima." He said, "I love Usama more than anybody except for Fatima." Okay, so she was the most beloved person to the Prophet, peace be upon him. So by Ali marrying her, this, in a sense, is the projection, the continuation of his uh, legacy, of his family, and they became known as Ahlul Bayt. This is the people of the house of the Prophet ﷺ. They have a very important place in Islamic history. And Ali not only combined these great characteristics, he was also very courageous. So he was naturally courageous. And you'll see Ali, radiallahu anh, when the battles happened, you'll see him in the front lines. Ali had this, he was like a lion when it came to opposing evil things. And so he's combining these things. He has this courage, he has the character of the Prophet ﷺ. But remember now, when the Prophet came into prophethood, Ali was there. And it is reported that when Khadija radiallahu anha had accepted Islam, there was only two people who were Muslims. One is a woman, right? Remember this. And on one occasion, they were praying, and Ali, as a young man, some say 7, some say 9 years old, very young, and he saw them. And he said to them, "What are you doing?" And when they finished, they said, "We're making salat. We're praying to the one God, to Allah." And Ali said, "I would like to learn this." But the Prophet ﷺ, being very wise, he said, "I think you should ask your father. Ask Abu Talib. Like, I'm your guardian, but this is a big move that you have to make." This is great wisdom, because even in many societies today, they say that if a person is under a certain age and being a youth, that their parents' decision needs to be there, uh, when they are going to make very big decisions in their life. But Ali had wisdom, and he said that you're worshiping God, you're worshiping Allah. Allah is the one that created me. Abu Talib did not create me. So if I want to worship the Creator, why do I have to ask permission from my father? So he's not a rebellious youth like some youth today. They don't want to hear their father. No, it's not that. It's wisdom. So he said, "I want to be a Muslim. I want to do this, right? As a human being, I have the right." And so the Prophet, he agreed. Ali became a Muslim. So he was the first male to accept Islam, but he was a youth. And it was Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. He was the first adult male who had accepted Islam. And so the revelation is coming. Ali is part of the house of the Prophet. So therefore, he is actually living through revelation. And as a young person, he's taking in this knowledge. So this is not something small. This is major. And therefore, he had a profound understanding of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some even called him Bab al-Ilm. They even say that Ali is like the gateway to knowledge. Okay, and you'll see that in many different aspects of Islamic knowledge, in our theology and our spirituality, people actually relate to Ali as one of the chains, the isnads of knowledge and the isnads of spirituality. So he is crucial. He's a crucial person. And one of the characteristics that he had in terms of his knowledge that people don't necessarily realize sometimes is that when it came to fiqh, when it came to Islamic jurisprudence, Ali was considered probably the most knowledgeable. And when the descriptions are given of the companions, then the Prophet would say, "Aqdahum Ali," the one who had qada, the one who could make judgments best amongst my companions was Ali, radiallahu anhu. And so let's look at some of his areas. Of course, again, mastery of the Book of Allah. And so this is now not somebody that has to take a class in Arabic language or has to take a class in tafsir, right? Explanation of the Quran. None of this, because he was fasih, he was strong in his Arabic, and Ali was one of the people who actually wrote. At that time, Arabic was an oral culture. It's not illiterate. Illiterate is the wrong word. When you say the Prophet was illiterate, he wasn't illiterate. Because when we say illiterate, it means he's ignorant. He was unlettered. You see the difference in the two? So he is unlettered. It's an oral culture. It has just as much wisdom as a written culture, but they transport it through poetry. Instead of writing things down, they memorize everything. And so Ali radiallahu anh, he had both. He had an exceptional memory, and he was one of the early memorizers of the Quran, was Ali himself. And he understood it because he lived at the time when it was coming. So he could explain to you asbab nuzul, like what are the circumstances around these verses coming through. He could give you interpretations of the Arabic language and what it means in the context of the verse. So he was really good. And at that time, the Quran was the main source of legislation. Sunnah is there, but Sunnah was something implemented. And Imam Malik even, used as one of his next levels under the Quran, he said, Amal Ahlul Medina. He said that the actions of the people of Medina, once you have the Quran, and if you have the actions of the people of Medina, it's like what we say, Quran and Hadith, right? Like Sunnah, because they're the people of Medina. So what they do is the Sunnah, you see? So therefore, Ali then was one of the strongest in terms of the Book of Allah. And he was an excellent reciter of the Quran. He had excellent speaking ability. He was a great khatib and very wise. So his books, writing, and his quotes are also there. Okay, but in the area of fiqh, area of Islamic jurisprudence, not only did he have a good mind in terms of making decisions, but he actually developed foundations on how to make decisions. So this is what is called usul al-fiqh. This fiqh, which is your understanding, but your usul is how do you make a judgment on something. See, so Ali's sayings, Ali's decisions make the basis of usul al-fiqh and also practically implementing fiqh and making fatwas and whatnot. And, he is characterized by his fairness, justice. He implemented balance. He was very compassionate. Okay, so in terms of being a judge, he is one of the people who the companions depended upon. And when Abu Bakr took control as the Khalifa, when it came time to judgments, he would often go to Ali to help him make decisions. When Umar took over, Ali would also be there to make decisions, like a chief justice. That's what you'd call today, the chief. In America, it's the Supreme Court. So Ali would be the head of the Supreme Court. When Uthman took over, Uthman depended upon him as well as his type of Supreme Court justice. And this is very important to understand, because as the leadership is going down, it's not like one person seizing power and he's against the other people. No, they're all part of the leadership. And Ali was a very strong part of the Islamic leadership. And so he naturally came into his authority And when Uthman radiallahu anh was assassinated, uh, the companions got together, the ones who were in the selection committee, and they chose Ali to be the Khalifa. Okay, so this is around 656 AD or CE. And so Ali then becomes the Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he was very serious about implementing justice and equality, right? He's really serious about this. And he helped to organize the system of governance. And but it was a very difficult time because, as we have learned before, there was a struggle between with the Umayyads. Remember, Uthman was from the Umayyad clan, and they were struggling with the Hashemites also for power in Mecca. And so there was a tribal thing sort of showing itself. They also had accused Uthman of nepotism. So different people, the ones who were making fitna, the followers of Ibn Saba and other people, they said like he was appointing people for posts because they were Umayyads like him. So that's nepotism or favoritism of your family. So Ali was very particular in making sure that anybody who was put into a position was the suitable person for that position and also had piety so that people could clearly see that it was not made based upon tribalism. Okay, it's not just because he's a Hashimi. And Ali, again, because people tend to look at the fitna, at the political thing. No, there was a lot of things happening because as a struggle is going on for authority, there's also people living their life. So you need justice, you need courts, you need leadership. And so Ali was heavily involved in social justice. Okay, and especially in dealing with the poor and the marginalized. So this is what you'll see happening over and over again. That he's concerned about the poor, he's concerned about the oppressed. And this is with your pillar of zakat, the pillar of the poor due, to make sure that zakat is taken from people and it is distributed properly. And by doing this, you stabilize the government. You stabilize the society itself. Because if the society is not run properly economically, it's confusion. Look at the riots in the world. And I guarantee you, when you look at a country, they said they had a riot in Peru. They had a riot in Egypt. They had a riot in different countries. Usually it's based upon food. It's usually based upon, remember when the grain stopped coming from Ukraine, when people could not have their bread, right? When the taxes are raised, then you see riots. You see, if the price of gas goes up here, you're going to see confusion in society. In America, they're going to start shooting each other. Okay, because it's taxes, it's your life, it's how you survive. So Ali was very much concerned in equal distribution of the wealth. Okay, so these are qualities of your leader now. It's like he's setting goals, he's setting standards for leaders. Okay, so equality in wealth. And one of the proofs for this, which is left with us, and it is considered to be one of the most important documents on earth leadership. So this is now our fusion leadership. Because some people say, okay, you just talk and whatever. Give me some proof. What did he actually say? And so there's a letter that he sent to the governor of Egypt, Malik ibn Ashtar. Okay, and Egypt was one of the prize areas underneath Islamic rule. Because remember the two great rivers. One is the Tigris and Euphrates. That's Iraq. Okay, and the other is the Nile. So this was one of the important places for Muslim rule. And the Nile literally fed people in Arabia. And this is not just 1400 years ago. I can recall moving into Medina with my family, and this is in the 70s. And there was a place right near our house. We were living in Bab al Anbariya, that section of Medina. And there was a place called Bi'atha Misriya, right? So this Al Bi'atha, this place was like the Egyptian hostel. It's the Egyptian, hotel and their base of operations in Egypt. And it is said that a few decades before the discovery of oil in Arabia, the Saudis were so poor. This is 20th century now, right? Saudis were so poor that they used to line up with cups outside of the Bi'atha Misriya to get grain, to get food. That's how poor they were. And the Egyptians, because they had the Nile, so even if you have a drought, it doesn't matter because the Nile is flowing. So Egypt would literally export, send over as sadaqah to Medina and Mecca, send grain, send them dates, other things so that they could literally live up until the 20th century. So Egypt has always been one of the most important areas. Also in terms of population, the population in Cairo itself has always been one of the large cities, large populations in the Muslim world. So therefore, the leader in Egypt, the governor, he was very important. And in Ali's time, it was Malik ibn Ashtar. So he sent this letter to Malik ibn Ashtar, and in it, he was talking about the philosophy of leadership. So this is important. If you want to do a study, try to get this letter of Malik ibn Ashtar, and you will see the philosophy of leadership, how you implement justice, how the leader should be humble and accountable to the people. See, these are all foundations of what a leader is supposed to be. And if we had to choose a leader and to bring forward leadership from our youth, these are the qualities that our leaders. And you'll see that the leaders today are the opposite of this. They don't have justice. In many Muslim countries, unfortunately, and I say a Muslim country just because the majority of the people may be Muslims, but in the governance, there's no justice. Look at Tunisia. I don't like to mention names, but you look at certain places where the rulers are secular rulers, and they become tyrants. They're not humble. They're not accountable to the people. Ali set the pace. So if we are to change, and inshallah we will change, these are some of the qualities that our leaders. So looking at this letter, we want to break it down because this breaks down what Ali actually did, and you got some proof for this. Okay, number one, what is the purpose of governance? Okay, and he emphasized that leadership is a form of service. And the Prophet ﷺ, they used to say, Sayyid al-Qawm khadimuhum, that the leader of the tribe is the servant of the tribe. So the leader is not the sultan in the sense of the boss over the top of you, but the leader is supposed to be the person who sacrifices more than anybody else. He's the one at service, for the whole community. Okay, so it's not a personal thing where you are now powerful and you have control over everybody. So Ali writes, he says in translation, and this is only some snippets, some section from the letter. Let it be known to you, Malik, that I'm sending you to a land that has seen many governments before you, both just and unjust. People will scrutinize your actions, just as you observe the action of those before you. So people are going to watch you, right? Because Egypt has lived under so many rulers. Go back in ancient Egyptian history. I happen to have studied this in detail. And the Egyptians, they united their country in 3200 BC is when they had their first united government. And so they had rules, dynasties of pharaohs, people coming from the outside, the Persians, Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, so many coming in. And they were not all wicked pharaohs. There were some good leaders in Egypt as well. That's Ali's knowledge, right? You see how he even has some knowledge of history. Because he's saying there's been unjust and just. If you think that the Pharaoh is just all wicked pharaohs, you don't understand Egypt. Okay, they were also great leaders as well. So he's talking about this accountability, and he speaks about justice and the importance of justice and to avoid tyranny, right? Where you are oppressing people, because tyranny leads to the downfall of your rulers and societies. Now here's your letter. Ali then says to Malik, make justice your guide in dealing with those under your rule. Treat them all equally, for the subjects will complain of your rule only if you commit injustice. And this is critical because you'll see in the future, countries or rules like for instance, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans ruled for 600 years. How can you last for 600 years? There's very few dynasties in the history of this planet. One of the reasons is that the Ottomans, for the most part, they focused on justice for all, whether you're Turkish or non-Turkish, okay, Muslim or other ways of life. That's why people supported them, and they were able to stay in power and authority. And so he shows how that if you don't have justice, this is where you'll lose power and you'll lose the respect of other people. Very important advice. Next, he advises Malik also to be a compassionate person, to be humble yourself. And that goes back to the example of the Prophet ﷺ. One time a person came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and said, describe yourself to us. Okay? Like you say to some kings, describe yourself. I am the son of this person, the son of that person, from the great tribe of such and such. I control 7 continents. I do this, I do that. The Prophet ﷺ said, I am the son of one of your women. That's who I am. It's a humble person. Think about this. He's receiving revelation from above 7 heavens. So he has enough reason to be a very arrogant person, right? And he says, I'm the son of one of your women. And when they used to come to Medina, and there's a circle of people they're studying or just advising, then they would look, and if the Prophet ﷺ was not speaking, they would have to say, which one of you is Muhammad? Because he wasn't on a pedestal. He didn't have special robes on. He looked similar to many of the other people. When he started to talk, then they knew. Because all eyes and attention were for him. So Ali now continues in his letter. He says, people are 2 kinds. They are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. Now, this is a really important statement, okay? Because he's talking about not only justice, in a sense of for Muslims, but he's talking about universal justice, human rights. And up until today, this is one of the big things in the world. It's human rights. Okay? So Ali is saying that the people under you, they're either your brothers in faith or equals in humanity. So you treat your equals with kindness. You don't oppress them, right? These are universal foundations of leadership and law. And you see, these are now in the universal laws of human rights, the Geneva Convention, United Nations statutes. Ali actually set the pace for a lot of this. You get it out of his abilities. Okay? And he focuses on the poor and the vulnerable and the needy in society. He emphasizes this. And this is very important because the Marxist Leninist people, these are the socialist people. One of the biggest issue for them with the wealthy upper class is that they do not share wealth. you have the upper class bourgeoisie, and you have the proletariat, and that is the basis of the socialist revolution. Okay, what does Ali say? In his letter, he says, beware, fear Allah when dealing with the needs of the poor, those who have no resources, the destitute, and the handicapped. Look at this. This is the basis of universal law of human rights that people follow up until today in the United Nations in the world. Unfortunately, all this is being broken down now, in the present genocide in Palestine. But this is the way the world is supposed to be. 98% of the world's countries want justice, and they believe that the wealth should be distributed equally amongst. So Ali then emphasizes this, and he's focusing in some of the details of the letter and in his other speeches and sayings and his judgments. He focuses on taxation. Okay, that when the zakat comes in, when the taxes come in, this should be distributed fairly, so that the poor people do not have a burden to eat and drink and to live their life. This is crucial. Also, there are those who are handicapped, those who are poor. This is one of the reasons why Canada itself stands out as one of the better countries in the world, especially better than the United States, because you have um, a type of, you have the OHIP, you have your health, universal health, right? You also have um, some special amount stipends that are given to the pensioners, people who are handicapped. You see, these are universal principles laid down and set by people like Ali ibn Abi Talib, brother. And this is how we'll be able to judge our leaders as we go on in our course, inshallah. We'll be able to judge through these universal principles. Remember these principles. Okay, so this is how we're going to be able to judge as we go further along. Another important quality that Ali, radiallahu anh, that he emphasizes is accountability, transparency. And that's one of the big problems today with many of the leaders. They're not accountable to the people. They hide themselves in palaces. They surround themselves with the military, right? They don't have trustworthy advisors. They're not transparent to the people. And some years ago, they had big revolutions in the Arab world called the Arab Spring. And you've seen many Arab youth in the streets. That the leader of Egypt was actually overthrown. And so they were overthrown. And what were they saying in the Arab Spring? They said, Ashab yurid isqat al-nizam. They would say this over and over again, Ashab yurid isqat al-nizam, that the people want the government to come down. Why did they want it to come down? No transparency. There's no accountability. This is one of the key reasons. So Ali now in his letter to Malik says, the worst of your officials will be those who serve the unjust rulers before you. They will provide the same services to you. Therefore, do not employ them in your secret councils. So in other words, if you take over, if you're the leader, you come into a land, and you see people who are corrupt, get rid of them. Get rid of them. Bring in transparent people. Make systems of accountability. You see, systems of accountability. And this is crucial, what Ali radiallahu anh had established for the leaders. Another aspect of his leadership is that the people who were in the military, government, because remember, Omar had established government. Right? He set your different ministries, and Uthman put them into practice. Okay, so Ali now, he is stressing, fairness and respect for those people who are in the military, those people, who were in the government. And this is very crucial. You'll see a country like Pakistan, right? That most of the time Pakistan has been ruled by its army. The leaders were only just symbolic. So he's saying establish justice amongst the military people. And he says in his letter, be mindful of your army and treat them as your family, for they are the shield of the nation. Okay, this is principles. These are principles for leadership. And if we are to establish an Islamic country, an Islamic leadership, these should be our principles. Okay? So what happens with this is that he develops loyalty, he develops discipline, and this now closes ranks. And you see that the people were very, very loyal to Ali, radiallahu anh, even when some broke away, the majority stayed and gave their life. So he stresses that you need to follow Islamic rules of governance. You don't just make decisions based upon what you think, your hawa, that means your whims, right? But based on divine law. That should be the basis for the decisions and the justice. And he said, let no decision you make be based on anger or passion, for that is the path to misguidance. That's really important because many times you see leaders and kings, they base their rule on revenge. They base on the emotions, like a tribal thing, my tribe against the other tribe. See, Ali, in his way of rule, he sets down foundations for the future. And so he was very cautious to say that you need to watch out for dhulm, is oppression. And he said the oppression of the people will lead to rebellion. Beware of oppressing the people, for the wronged has no defense except Allah. Right? Allah will come to the defense of those who are oppressed. Okay, so this is really, really important advice. Okay, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's a hadith that is that ittaqu da'wat al-mazlum laysa bainaha wa bain Allahi hijab. Prophet peace be upon him said, beware of the dua of the oppressed person, because there is no barrier in between that prayer and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ali emphasized this point. Do not become oppressors, dhalimin, because you will be judged on the day of judgment. Fear Allah in how you're dealing with people, because you will be judged. And this is a crucial element within the leadership itself. So this letter is a timeless letter. And these principles show the deep understanding that Ali radiallahu anh, that he had. And it shows the quality of justice, humility, accountability, right? To avoid oppressing people, to make sure you're taking care of the poor and the needy, to make sure you're accountable to people. Okay? And what's beautiful here, and this is our witness in the fusion, is that Ali is combining scholarship. He's combining scholarship with authority, sulta. See, so it's not too separated. We have the scholars over here, and you have the sultan and the emir over there. He's combining the two. So not only is he highly knowledgeable, makes good decisions, he's also a strong leader. He has sulta. And that is what we pray for. That is the highest pinnacle. That's the highest level. It's an ideal that sometimes we can't reach, but it's something that we hope and pray could come about. And you'll see it, and we'll show some examples of this that happened in the Muslim world. What is significant about this is that he was the Khalifa. So he was the ruler of the whole Muslim world. And that is something amazing, and it sets the pace uh, for our understanding of minarets and thrones, right? This is the fusion, and this is what we're looking for in the leadership. And Ali radiallahu anh set a beautiful example. And he died in his leadership position, always standing forward and ready to sacrifice for the truth and to sacrifice for justice. So I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have concerning, the fusion leadership of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Floor is open. Mhm. So the question is, Ali was against tribalism and Islamic leadership is against. How do we enforce that today? Well, this is the same issue because if we're implementing the Quran itself and the Sunnah, that would be our way because clearly the Quran is showing us that the best in the akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the best of you, in the eyes of Allah is the one who has the most taqwa. It's not the one who's the most Arab or the one who's the tallest. No, it is the one who has the most. The Prophet ﷺ said very clearly, there's no fadl, there's no preference for Arabs over non-Arabs, or non-Arabs over Arabs, for white over black or black over white, illa bittaqwa, except for piety. So this is literally implementation of Islam. And those who implement tribal ways of doing things, they're in ignorance and they're in jahiliyyah. You see, they're in ignorance. Now, we will see as time goes by, and there's an example of one of the great khilafats or one of the great rules in West Africa. It's a place called Bornu. And Bornu is in now northern Nigeria on the eastern side, Maiduguri, and over toward Chad, by where Lake Chad is. And the Bornu dynasty was actually the rulers for a long period of time. They are Muslim rulers. Okay, and people say, okay, why were they so stable? Because if the scholars see if there's a tribe of people or a group who have natural leadership qualities, and the people are satisfied as the leadership, and they implement Islam, and you have ulama who can criticize them, then that will work. And that stabilized Bornu. And I witnessed this myself. I'm not going to say which country it is, but I witnessed this myself when I came in this country and I met some of the royal family in this country, and they were taller than everybody else. And they had big hands. So, and they were the leaders. So it's almost like a wolf pack, right? It's just like the strongest wolf. So if the wolf is just and follows Islam, that's fine with us. The problem is when the leader uses his power to oppress the people or to seize more power, that's no good. Okay? So it can work, but in 90% of the cases, it doesn't work. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said he distinguished between khilafah and mulk, between the divine rule of the caliphate and kingdom. Okay? So sometimes in the kingdom, in the royal family, there is somebody who's just. And we're going to see some examples of this. And they follow the law, they're humble, they're going back to the prophetic example, that is fine. But the mistake is that the person becomes a leader and he's a little tyrant. and he takes over just because his father was the king. Right? This is the way of the secular people. This is what ruined societies all over the world, and we don't want this. We want Islamic leadership. So once you understand the principles, now you can see if a person is really a proper Muslim leader or not. If they say, "Well, I'm from the Prophet's family and my beard is like 2 feet long, my cap is really high," but they're arrogant and they're not transparent, you see? And they're making you follow their rules and not the Quran and the Sunnah. That's not your leader. I don't care what family they come from. That's not the leader of Islam. And this is what our younger generation, the people who we're now in a transition all over the Muslim world, even in our Muslim communities here in the West, we're in a transition. And those executive committees, those people in leadership who do not represent Islam, who are holding on to power, they need to go. And the younger generation now, they want change. So this group, these people need to go because we need what you could call meritocracy. Like merit is like your abilities. It's what you deserve. So a meritocracy is not a democracy, right? It is meritocracy. So the one who's the leader is the most suitable for leadership. That's the way that our leaders are. And they're suitable because they implement the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Now, any questions anybody has? Floor is open now for any questions. Anything else online?
Why is there confusion between if Ali was supposed to be the fourth Khalifa and the Shias?
Yeah, so this issue of the question is, what is the confusion with Ali and the whole Shia Sunni type of thing? This is a long discussion, and we have a course that we did, which is groups, sects, sects, and groups in Islam, or cults and groups in Islam, in the Muslim world. So you will see the evolution of how this actually evolves. And you can see the development of how this comes about. Ali radiallahu anh, he was the companion of Abu Bakr when he took over. He was a companion of Umar when he took over. He was a companion of Uthman when he took over. But there were people who were causing fitna and trying to say that because he is the son, like the son of the Prophet, he's married his daughter. It's like a royal family, because some people, they need to have a king. They need a prince and a king. In Persia, they had their divine rule, the Shah and whatever. The Egyptians had their pharaohs. So they needed it. And in the Prophet's example and in Sunnah, they can't find it. So they tried to make it out of Ali. Ali rejected it. But eventually, they got followers. And then they became very extreme, and added different things, to Islamic teachings. And so now you literally have a group that's outside. Some of them just have a political difference, but there's others that really went outside. And they actually almost made another religion. So this, what we're giving you here now is to show you what happened, a balanced understanding of Ali, what he actually stood for. And what was the reality of the early generations. But you'll always have people who want the king. They want a royal family. This is how they raise. That's not Islam. Islam is not based on tribalism. It's not based on royal families. So you'll always have that tug of war that goes on between the groups.
So they wanted to create a monarchy out of the ancestry of Ali.
Right, because if you look at it, Ali now is the cousin, because the Prophet had no sons. So he's his cousin, and he was raised in his house like his son. And then he married his daughter. So the children there would be the inheritors. Although according to the paternalistic system, where you just follow the males, it would be cut off because there's no male. Ali's a cousin. But for people who want that type of thing, that's the closest. that you possibly get to the royal family.
Isn't that what happened though? Because after Ali radiallahu anhu passed away, he was killed, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it one of his sons that became the next Khalifa?
Right. So what happened was, the question is, didn't that actually happen? When Ali had been stabbed and poisoned, they came to him. He was dying, and they said, "What about your son Al-Hassan? Do you want him to take over?" And Ali said, "I don't say yes, and I don't say no. You make the decision." You see, if he had in his mind royal family, he said, "Take Hassan." Hassan was a little older than Hussein. So take Al-Hassan now, but he didn't, because he would have created a kingdom. And they chose Al-Hassan, who was a good choice, very good leader, very intelligent. Okay, and he ended up giving over the rule to Muawiyah because there was a misunderstanding. And the Muslims basically accepted Muawiyah's rule, and everything went back to normal. But Muawiyah made the mistake of choosing his son Yazid, because Yazid, and this is the Umayyads, he was not suitable for leadership. And that's where, a confusion, came about, in the leadership. Okay, but the basis of the rule that Ali radiallahu anhu had established was not based on his family. Okay, that was a decision made by the selection committee, and it was accepted by the masses of the Muslim people. So that was okay. Any other questions anybody has? Floor is open for any general questions. So next week, inshallah, we'll continue on.
Sorry, I do have.
Okay, one more question. No, go ahead.
It's about Egypt, when the state of Egypt, when Ali radiallahu anhu sent the letter over. I wanted to know more about that. Was it already a Muslim country?
Yeah.
And was Malik already was he already the governor when Ali came into power?
Yeah. So basically, Egypt itself, Misr, it was ruled by Coptic Christians. So when the Prophet ﷺ sent letters to the kings, he sent one to Egypt who Muqawqas was his name, the leader of the Coptics. So they were Christians. And when the Muslims now, spread out, and they realized that, they were Coptics, but they were ruled by the Romans. And the Romans had attacked the Muslims. So the Muslims then liberated Egypt. And I've read documents written by non-Muslim historians. And they said that the people of Egypt considered the Romans to be foreigners, oppressors. And when the Muslims came into the land, they accepted the Muslims as their leaders, because the Muslims did not force them to become Muslim. And you have Coptic Christian communities in Egypt up until today. So they did not force them, to accept Islam. And they lifted the oppression, out, from the Romans that had controlled that land. At that point, the leader was Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. He was the leader. And it was later on, I'm not sure if there's somebody in between, but it was in Ali's time now that he appointed Malik ibn Ashtar. Right? So he wasn't originally the leader in Egypt, it was Amr ibn al-As.
So Malik was chosen by Ali.
I don't know the exact details of how he came, but I believe he was the one appointed by Ali to be the leader. Yeah.
There's a couple more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so, can you talk about the Kanem Empire?
Which one?
Kanem, K-A-N-E-M.
E-M. Okay, so when I said Bornu, this is in northeast Nigeria and now Chad, in the Lake Chad region. That is sometimes called Kanem Bornu. So they use is two, because Kanem is one section and then Bornu is another section. So this is an area where there's some great kings who are living there, Kanuri people and other people living in that area. There were kings there before, and they embraced Islam early. From when the Sahaba came across North Africa, some of them went south. They say that Uqba ibn Nafi even went south across the desert. So they accepted Islam very early. It was one of the earliest parts of Central and West Africa to accept Islam. And they had great scholars. They were recognized by the Muslims in Cairo and the Muslims in Morocco. It was a great empire called Kanem Bornu dynasty. And so this is what makes up present-day Nigeria. It's all been lost when the British conquered. They sort of merged everything, together. But the Kanem Bornu was the leadership in northeast Nigeria and parts of Lake Chad. It was a very large dynasty. And it is said that even the Ottomans and other people, they loved the Qurans that were written by them. They did it on leather, beautiful designs and whatnot. And some of the scholars from Kanem Bornu used to go to Egypt and study in the great universities there in Cairo. So they were connected directly to the Muslim world. And it's a very important history that needs to be read and understood. Now, other question?
Yes, it seems like the end of Ali's Khalifa ended the succession of the righteous Khalifa. Were there Muslim leaders that emerged afterwards that showcased righteous leadership?
Yes, so now the question is, were there other leaders who had righteous? That's what we'll be covering in the next class, inshallah. Now we're going to show you what happens. Because in some cases, you have the scholars who disagree with the leader. So you have the leader becomes tyrannical, and the Muslim scholars disagree, and they stand up against the leader. Okay. Then you have sometimes when the scholars submit to the leader, and that's when things really get bad. Then you have sometimes when the leaders work with the scholars, and that becomes a good rule also. So we're going to look at these different types and how they actually played out at different points in Islamic history. And this can give us some alternatives for the future, inshallah, in terms of how it can be done. So next class, inshallah, we will now go into a different understanding of the rulers and the scholars. And this is going to be a little bit different, but it'll show you what actually happened in our history and what we need to implement in the future, inshallah.
I have another question about when you're talking about Ali helped kind of create the foundation for decision making in fiqh, and he established like usul al-fiqh, right? Can you talk a little bit more about how he did that? Are there like examples or certain decisions that caused that?
Yeah, so basically in the first generation, you have the Quran coming down, you have the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, you have the actions of the companions and their sayings. Now, in the next generation, when Islam is spreading, the people need to know how to pray. They need to know what is real Islam from false Islam. Because you have some people who are making their own version of Islam. So that's when they started the science of hadith, to know what is a strong hadith or a weak hadith. They studied the science of tafsir, interpretation of the Quran itself, to explain it, explanation of the Quran. And they started the science of fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence. How do you implement Islam in your life? Okay, so in order to have a system of implementing Islam, you need foundations for this. How do you make a judgment? Somebody comes to you with an issue. How do you judge? So sometimes something will say, there's good in it and there's bad in it, right? If the good outweighs the bad, then we'll go with the good. So there's different, that's where Ali's statements come in. And because of his judgments, that's how they took these things to make the rules of fiqh. Yeah. So in Ali's time, it was not called usul al-fiqh. There was no usul al-fiqh. There was no hadith subject. There was no tafsir subject. None of it. Because they were just implementing Islam. It's later on, in order to codify the teachings, that they made disciplines in order to codify. So somebody could come along now and they could learn the disciplines of the Quran, the disciplines of hadith, the disciplines of fiqh, because there's no Sahaba around, there's no Tabi'een. So how are you going to learn it? So that's the reason why it's been codified. So somebody can actually go back to the authentic sources and they can become a true scholar or a true Muslim leader. So this is how, but in the beginning, it is like this letter to Malik Ashtar, it is these sayings and judgments that form the basis of your fiqh or your Islamic jurisprudence. Okay, so inshallah, we will continue on next week, and we're going to go into a new phase now. Very interesting to see the relationship of the scholars to the leaders. It's part of our reality, and we need to know this. So when you look at the Muslim world today, you'll see that some of the things being done today by some of the leaders was already been done, already happened. Okay, so you need to know this in order to come out of it. That's our intention, and to make a new path for Islamic leadership. So I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.